Kia ora koutou. Welcome to the launch of Docket. Settle in, we're about to get started. Tu tara mai I runga, tu tara mai I raro, tu tara mai I waho, tu tara mai I roto. Kia tau ai te Māori tū, te Māori ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tā ki e. Kia ora koutou, no mai, hari mai. Te whare e te nui, tēnā koe. Te papa e waho, tēnā koe. Ki te mana whenua o te rohi nei, tēnā koutou. Kei te whānu e hui hui nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Holly Norton toku ingoa, kei SBN ahu mahi ana. Ko tangata te riti te iwi. No ingarangi me te taipu tini o kutupuna, ai tipu aki o ke whakatū e noho ana ki paikakariki. Nō reira, kia ora tātou katoa. Kia ora and welcome everybody. My name is Holly Norton. I'm the Regenerative Design Lead for SBN, and today I'm launching Docket, which is an incredibly exciting sustainability tool that we are really excited to share with you all here today. Before we start though, I'd just like to take a second to acknowledge, in my mihi we're saying, acknowledging Papatūānuku, and it's a really tough time across New Zealand at the moment with everything that is happening with the cyclone, everything that is happening in communities. We know a lot of people are hurting, the land is hurting, and we really seriously thought hard about whether to go ahead with today's webinar. But on getting some feedback from our community about the right thing to do, we've landed at a point of realizing that to launch Docket today is incredibly important timing, because Docket is a sustainability tool that allows businesses to take action on fighting climate change, on looking after community, on doing all of the things around social and environmental sustainability that businesses can do to really support both people and planet in everyday circumstances, but also as we look to a, I guess, less certain future over the next few years. So it's with both excitement that we get to launch something so exciting and effectively impactful today, but also with a note of sadness and a sort of acknowledgement of everything that is happening across the country. So for those of us who are tuning in and joining us today, we really acknowledge you taking that time and thank you for being here. So how today is going to work is effectively we've got like 10-15 minutes at the start of this webinar where I can walk you through the tool. We've also got online on the call who's going to pop up a bit later and introduce themselves, many of the other experts who've been behind writing the tool's content. And we're going to get a chance to ask them some questions, sort of about 20-25 minutes where you're going to be able to ask questions in that Q&A function at the bottom and really get to speak to, some of the sort of leading experts on health and safety and modern slavery and workers' rights and sustainability in New Zealand and ask your business questions. So today's event is really around action, and I really encourage you to take your opportunity to do that. So use that Q&A function as we go through, and we'll get to a point a bit later where we'll get a chance to answer some of those questions. Without further ado, let's take a look at Docket. So Docket is a sustainability self-assessment tool. What does that mean and who is that for? Well, a self-assessment tool is essentially a questionnaire that is online, and it allows you to answer yes or no to 3 to 8 questions across a range of different sections. And those sections include climate action, they include reducing waste, they include regenerating nature, include modern slavery, workers' rights, and keeping your workers healthy and safe. And those 3 to 8 questions in each section, what those questions allow you to do is figure out, am I doing everything I need to be doing to be exhibiting best practice in that area? So if you can tick off yes to every question in a section, that's incredible, that's amazing. Very few businesses can do that yet, but that is the gold standard. That is what we're all aiming for, is to be able to say yes to these things. If you say no, not a problem. In fact, that's great, because what Docket does is it's really a connector and a portal to all of the other tools and resources that are out there that can help you achieve in those areas. The great thing about Docket is that it has come together through a sort of 18-month co-design process with business and government working really closely together. So you know that those tools and those resources and the advice the Docket is giving you and the examples of best practice is really achieving something quite unusual and a bit of a first from what I'm aware of in New Zealand, where we're actually able to say that both business and government agree that this is what best practice looks like in this area. If you're achieving this, you can feel really confident you're doing the right thing. Yeah, so that kind of co-design has been really, really effective. The other fantastic thing has been that we've had so many people through the co-design process who are small and medium-sized businesses involved in using the tool and testing the tool, that we're really hoping to have simplified that process for you so it's really easy to use. So I'll screen share with you now and we'll start taking a look at the tool and you can see it in action. Perfect. So here you see the SBN webpage. For those of you who haven't been to the SBN webpage before, it is a fantastic resource for all kinds of information about taking sustainability action across all areas of your business. There are many, many resources on here, and I encourage you just to stuck in and have a play and see what you can find. The Sustainable Business Network has been around since about 2002 in New Zealand. We have a large network of businesses who are engaged in learning, taking action, sharing what they're working on. It's an incredibly cool community of people who are really at the front line of that change. But if you're looking for Docket, fresh on the website today, you scroll down and you'll see this Docket sign here. So Docket, building a more sustainable supply chain for your business. So this is Docket. Docket is a toolbox. So the self-assessment tool I'm talking about is the main tool in the toolbox, but there are other things here, if you scroll down, that you can also take action on and use to help you along the way. So this is a self-assessment tool, but just to show you, if you scroll on a bit further, you'll see we've got access to lots of different kinds of sustainable procurement training. This is a resource that shows you about benefits of sustainability to your business, taking action in supply chain. Those of you who have to write business cases, this is really helpful. You can just pull things from this to drop into business cases and build your case for action. We've got a whole lot of really helpful resources down here, which are things that we at SBN have written and pulled together. And also this fantastic resource for those who haven't seen it yet, the Circular Economy Directory. This is a platform effectively that will connect you to all of the businesses in New Zealand who have signed up to it, who are doing great things around being more circular. So a really great place to find sustainable suppliers if you're someone who's looking to buy from ethical businesses. But let's start with the self-assessment tool. And just one note before I do, actually, you'll notice that we're talking about a self-assessment tool, we're talking about sustainability, and then we keep mentioning procurement and suppliers and those resources down there. And why are we doing that? The reason we're doing that is because while Docket is a self-assessment tool and you predominantly would use it to assess yourself, to go, well, how am I stacking up? Or what am I doing well that I can really shout out about and celebrate and feel proud about and know that I'm meeting best practice standards? And what am I not doing so well that I can improve on? The way that Docket is most effective in creating change is if you don't just do that self-assessment and stop there. If you do that self-assessment, figure out where you're at, and then send this tool onto your suppliers. Send this tool onto the people that you're buying from, or pull questions that you like out of this tool as you're reading through and go, yeah, that's really important to me. Pull that question out, copy paste it out of the tool and use it to ask questions of the people that you're buying things from, the businesses that you're buying things from, and check that they too are meeting these standards. And if they need help answering those questions, understanding how to improve, send them the tool. That's what it's there for. So hopefully we will create a chain reaction across the country of businesses knowing what they're great at and knowing how to get better. But let's jump in and have a look. So here's the self-assessment tool. It gives you a bit of information about how to use it. We won't go into that today. You can read it in your own time. Hopefully this will help be a fast track. So if you scroll down here, you'll see the 6 sections we talked about: carbon emissions, reducing waste, regenerating nature, keeping workers healthy and safe, upholding workers' rights, and eliminating modern slavery. So if we just take a look at one of the sections, let's go for, where shall we start? Let's just take a look at reducing carbon emissions. That's something we all think about a lot at the moment. How do we take action on climate change and carbon? So each page will start like this. It gives you a little bit of an insight into what is going on and why to take action on carbon. It then has this need to know section. This is really key, particularly if you're starting out on your journey. So each section in the need to know bit right up front will tell you what the legal minimum is that you need to be meeting. We don't encourage just meeting the legal minimum, but if you're not meeting the legal minimum, you get in a whole lot of trouble. So we encourage you being a lot better than the legal minimum, striving to best practice, but it's really good to know sort of, okay, figure out where I am between here's what I need to do to be meeting the legal minimums, to be in line with the law, and here's what I need to do to be at the top of my game, to be a leading business in this field. So this first bit is just a good check. And particularly in some of these emergent spaces, there may be bits of legislation or regulation that apply to only some businesses in some areas. So this will give you a good sense, hey, is that something I need to be aware of? For example, here we talk about making climate-related disclosures. That's only really relevant if you're quite a large business who is publicly listed, trading on the stock market. But good to know, good to be aware of. And then you get into the self-assessment section. So for here, we see step 1, you get these little questionnaires. Do you measure your carbon emissions? Anything highlighted in green like this you don't understand, hover, it'll give you a bit of a definition. So this here explains what we mean by carbon emissions, catch-all term for greenhouse gases. If you were like, yes, I measure my carbon emissions, I imagine many of you on the call do already because you are interested in sustainability, so you're probably taking action, and that is great. Measuring is the first step. You click yes, and the tool says, great. And what it does is it gives you an example of how to talk about what you're doing effectively. When might you use this information? Probably when you're looking to sell something that you make, a product or a service. So in particular, you might want to use this, for example, if you want to supply a government department or you want to supply a larger organization with your product that you make, and they give you an RFP or a request for information, or they just ask you some questions about your sustainability as you're getting involved in that process of figuring out whether you're a good fit to supply for them. You can almost copy paste these little lines here and tweak them for your own organization. They're a really good sort of template of the kinds of information that these businesses are looking for. They're not comprehensive. You're probably, some of you will be doing more things that are listed here. Some will be doing slightly different things that are listed here, but it's a really good example of the kinds of things that you can talk about. If you click no, however, and you can click yes or no, we're not sort of tracking your data. It doesn't spit out a score at the end. It just lets you click yes or no for each one and read. So feel free to click both if you want to see what's under. If you click no, it says, cool, this is how you go about measuring your carbon. Here's the places you can go to get a comprehensive footprint calculator. Down the bottom here, Climate Action Toolbox, really great place to go get a carbon footprint calculator. Here's the things that you might want to be aware of to go about doing that. And just to kind of move it on a bit more quickly, it's the same across all these different questions. Do you measure emissions associated with specific products or services? Yes, great. Here's an example. No, that's okay. But here's how you can go, where you can go to figure out how to do that if that is something that you want to achieve. So I'll just sort of scroll over the carbon section. The carbon section is the longest. As we all know who've tried to do it for small business, carbon can feel a little bit tricky, but hopefully by answering these kind of 8 questions in this section, you can get a sense of where you're stacking up and where you can get help. There we go. So that's the carbon section, but we might just have action before we open up to the panel today. So maybe let's have a look at one that one of our speakers is going to be talking to, keeping workers healthy and safe, for example. So, all businesses in New Zealand have rights and responsibilities to keep their workers healthy and safe at work. And what this section does tells you a little bit about what you need to know. In this case, you need to be aware of the Health and Safety at Work Act, and it asks you some simple questions about what you're doing. So do you identify and assess health and safety risks in your business? Hopefully you all do. Here's some great things you could be looking at and doing. However, if you don't, here's some things that you could be looking to consider. Have you taken into account, the risks that your employees might be facing? And there's some great case studies along the way here as well. Similarly, if we kind of skim over the rest of the section, how do you then minimize those risks that you've identified? How do you work with another business to make sure that if you've got a shared risk, you're taking action? So feel free to go to the Docket URL in the background of this webinar and have a look now and have a play, because I'm just about to open up to our panelists who are the experts in these areas and answer some of your questions. The final thing that I wanted to kind of do before we jump into that area, and I can go through more of the tool if there are questions relevant to that, is note when you're using the tool, keep an eye on this sidebar over here. This can help you navigate to different sections if you get a bit lost. And in some cases, we'll give you some really great case studies. So if we jump into the reducing waste section, for example, in this one, link through the circular economy directory, that's something that's really key to know. We went back into the carbon section, keep a look on that sidebar. You can see some other tools and some case studies that might be helpful along the way. So Just before we do, and just before we move on, I just want to acknowledge, you can see here, Carbon, brought to you by the Ministry for Environment and Sustainable Business Network, the partners who've been involved in making this a reality. So I keep mentioning, let's just close this for now and stop sharing. So I keep mentioning that this has been a huge collaboration, and this collaboration between business and government is what makes it such a useful tool. It's what can give you confidence in this tool, that when we ask you to do something or ask you if you are doing something, that definition of best practice applies across the country for both business and government. But who are those people who've been involved? So the sustainability sections we talked about, climate action, regenerating nature and reducing waste, that's brought to you by Sustainable Business Network and by the Ministry for the Environment. So that's been a great collaboration there. Similarly, we've got, coming up to join us in just a second, we've got Jonathan Tu. He has written the Workers' Rights and the Modern Slavery section. Jonathan is from the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment. Shouldn't stumble over that. I used to work there. So MB have been really fantastic in really help us nail that section. And for those of you who know Employment New Zealand, within MB, that section, that area has been really critical in helping us achieve that. Jenny will be joining us too, Jenny Gianotti. So Jenny has worked on the WorkSafe health and safety questions. WorkSafe has partnered with us to make sure that those are correct. And finally, we've had some great sponsors along the way. MAS, which is the Medical Assurance Society, has a huge network of businesses who've been working with us to make sure this really works for business. And they themselves are a medium to large organization who's going to be using the tool. We've had Westpac Government Innovation Fund supporting us. We started this in a GovTech Accelerator with Creative HQ. We had Amotai, Akina, iSparks, some really fantastic community organizations contributing their knowledge. So a lot of hard work and a lot of people have contributed to bringing this to you today. So I'll open up now to the Q&A. And I will bring Jonathan and Jenny up to answer your questions. Kia ora. Fantastic. Jonathan and Jenny, can you hear us okay?
Yeah.
Great. Oh, yes, we've zoomed in on your face now, Jenny. That is fantastic. And Jonathan too. Jenny and Jonathan, I'll just get you to introduce yourself for sort of 30 seconds. Maybe these guys have already done a fantastic breakfast event this morning talking about this, similar to that, sort of who are you, what brought you to being involved in this? Start with you, Jenny.
Kia ora koutou, ko Jenny Gianotti Takaringawa, ke mahi hamaru Aotearoa I mahi ana. Kia ora, I'm Jenny Gianotti from WorkSafe New Zealand. We're really pleased to be involved with Docket. I guess we're really keen to make sure that businesses are involving their workers in managing health and safety risks and getting them involved. Workers on the ground will understand and know your risks the best and can give you advice on how things are actually working in practical terms and where there might be changes. So it's good to be here today. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Kia ora. Thank you, Jenny. And Jonathan, over to you.
Kia ora. My name's Jonathan Tu. I'm from New Zealand, and we recognise that worker rights and modern slavery are a really key part of sustainability. So we've been really happy to be part of working on this tool to bring that into people's considerations when they think about sustainability and their considerations, especially with their supply chains.
Fantastic. And I can see there's a question about modern slavery popped up. So we'll jump to you in just a second, Jonathan. But just before we do, I'll answer the couple of broad questions that have popped up. So one question here is the tool free or is there a cost to use it? The tool is 100% free. That is why all of us partners have come together and worked so hard and kind of pooled our resources to make it free for you as business. As we know, about 96% of businesses in New Zealand are small to medium-sized enterprises who don't get a lot of support with this stuff. This is a free tool for that exact reason, to support you. That said, for larger businesses, for businesses who have a long supply chain, who are looking to buy more ethically, and you want to be able to share this tool with your suppliers, you want to be able to share this tool with basically anybody that you work with, the tool is also free for you too. It is a free resource and hopefully it can just help spark action and connect everybody to the information they need. The other question that I will just answer now before we get into it is this geared towards individual or business? It is geared towards businesses. So as you answer the questions, you'll be answering it from a business perspective. That said, it applies to all business. So I personally have run a very small business in the past, and I know what it's like to be from a business that has sort of one paid employee. That still applies to you. You know, if you're the only person involved in your business, you can still ask yourself these questions and get a sense of how you're stacking up on these things, right the way through to businesses that are, you know, ginormous, the largest of large businesses. All these questions apply, but it is targeted towards small and medium-sized businesses. Hopefully it's really accessible and easy to use for you. Now, over to the modern slavery question. Jonathan, are you ready? Hannah would like to know, I was wondering if the modern slavery section has been set up to align with the upcoming modern slavery legislation, or at least what was proposed for consultation last year. I know this is a tricky one because things are still in play, but Jonathan, do you have something to comment on that?
I mean, things are still in play. However, they are key questions that you might start to consider areas around modern slavery in your supply chain, and they do link to information on Employment New Zealand, which provides some more sort of detail about how you can consider things in areas of modern slavery around treatment of workers when you're procuring, and also if you're running your own business. So it is a line in that sense, but obviously details in terms of modern slavery legislation are yet to come to full fruition.
Awesome. Thank you, Jonathan. And there is some great info in the tool about how to get started. Really, from what I've heard from working closely alongside Jonathan and testing this with a lot of businesses, is asking questions, asking your supply chain questions. And when I talk about supply chain, that can feel a bit daunting if you're a small business. You know, well, I don't have a supply chain. All we mean by supply chain is anybody you buy anything from, your pens, your travel, when you need to book a flight to go somewhere, absolutely any sort of product or material or service, if you have cleaners, all people that you can be asking questions about their values and just checking, saying, hey, I really care about people. I want to make sure that people are being paid well and looked after. So, you know, how do you make assurances that that is going on for me? Brilliant. I can see lots of questions coming through, so I'll sort of answer them in order as they're coming in. We have this one here from Tim. What is the process to be considered for the sustainable suppliers list? So that is the circular economy directory that you saw. That is a process that you apply for, and it basically it's sitting slightly outside of Docket, but Docket is linked into it because they are so critically linked. But if you go onto the SBM website and you go to the circular economy directory, there will be a way on there that you can apply to be a part of that. And they'll have a chat to you about making sure that you are meeting some of those circular standards. You'll probably get in contact with an awesome woman called Lucy, who can help get you sorted and get you on there if you are in fact doing some really awesome things around being circular and being sustainable in many different ways. The great thing about Circular Economy Directory as well is that it acknowledges that not everybody is doing absolutely everything, but you can search by the kinds of circular and sustainable action people are taking. Great tool, definitely check it out. Also, just to note, if you're online, feel free to thumbs up questions. It will help move them higher up the list, and it will give more chance that we will get to read them. So I can see at the bottom, yep, 3 have just been thumbs up. Great. On this one here, which is, as the tool is for New Zealand, are there resources for organisations with an international value chain, as you suggest sharing the tool with an organisation's suppliers? Great question. This tool is targeted at New Zealand at this stage. We did have some really great chats this morning about ways that we could actually make that more applicable for an international supply chain. Really encourage to have conversations with the people who are involved in that area. So maybe let's look at making that happen. The main thing, though, is that this tool doesn't really focus on minimum compliance, as we mentioned. It's more of a best practice tool, but it does show you what minimum compliance is. So that is where it becomes tricky from an international perspective. So at that first bit at the beginning where it says, what do you need to know? And it says, here's sort of the legal floor, the legal minimum in any area. That applies to New Zealand because we couldn't really list what the legal minimum was for everywhere across the world. But the best practice you'll start to see in the answers, that is mostly best practice consistent with what you would see globally. You know, best practice isn't legislated. Best practice is what the business community believes to be best practice. We have worked in co-designing this with government departments and businesses in New Zealand. We haven't been working with international business, but from what we've been told from those government departments and from business, that is best practice that we're working to at this stage. And you should be pretty consistent using that. Yeah, thank you for that one. What have we got popping up next? Number 4, is there any certification Is there any certification out there specific for sustainable supply chain? There is quite a few certifications that you can get for various aspects of your supply chain. I'll open that back to our panel for specific sections. Is there anything that you would recommend, Jenny or John, that people would look at certification-wise?
So there's a range of things in the health and safety sphere. One of the ones that WorkSafe MB and ACC have worked on is called Safe Plus. We have a Safe Plus online tool which gives you a self-assessment of how your business is doing, talks to your workers through a survey, find out what your risks are going. So that's helpful and gives you links to guidance. And there's a paid service called Safe Plus On-Site Assessment, an advisory service where there are independent Safe Plus assessors who will go into a business and against some risks to look at how you are performing. That is a paid service, however. So yeah, of course there are other products out there in the market in terms of health and safety, but just highlight those.
Great, thanks, Jenny. What about you, Jonathan, in the workers' rights space?
There are products out there in terms of supply chain and looking at the worker rights side of things. There are some shared platforms which people use that have audits. So things like SEDEX or B Corp certifications. Again, a lot of those around audits in time. We look at the whole kind of assurance chain. So in some content on our website that's linked from the tool, there's end-to-end assurance points there, and within that there's a number of different areas, including audit, but also with like worker voice channels and things like that, which help with that kind of consideration. In terms of those certifications, there's a couple out there, those two at the moment.
Great. And yeah, in terms of sustainability, it's similar again. So there are things to look at, but they're often quite specific to the topic themselves. So obviously there are different ways that you can certify your measurements around your carbon footprint. In New Zealand, the Ministry for the Environment has a list of suppliers or providers, people who are trusted, that you can ask to certify the measurement of your carbon emissions. In the waste section, there'll be recommendations as well. So I really encourage you to have a look as you go through into those tools, into those suggested resources, and they hopefully will link you through to the global standards around what people are using. Globally, a lot of people use ISO standards to kind of figure out where they sit. And then on a more localized level, there's often providers you can pay to get a more formal certification. And then there's ones that I believe don't cost as much, probably free, like B Corp, but you have to do a lot of work to become verified through them. Less supply chain specific, sustainability specific though. The next most upvoted question is great. This one here, 8 questions and some comments coming through. So I will read this one out loud. I can see the tool being useful as a kind of desktop audit of what we have in place right now. Is there some kind of output that we could send to our managers so that we can get some actions in the gaps that we've found using the tool? Hey, yeah, that is a great question. And to be honest, it was a part of the vision when we started creating this tool, but you know, we're limited by the amount of, honestly, the amount of funding that we can bring in to kind of create something like this. So if you are a business who, or a government agency who sees real value in this, and you think that you would want to be able to save that data as you go through, and it's something you might want to work with us and partner around. Sustainable Business Network is a charity. We do most of our work through these epic partnerships with community and government and business. Please do reach out. It's something I definitely think could be in the future for the tool. At the moment, what I would recommend in that sense, though, is really do just use the questions, do the self-assessment questionnaire, and kind of say, hey, look, we got 3 out of 8 in this section. We got 2 out of 5 in this section. Here's the gaps that came up for us. Here's the advice that it gave us, and use that to build a case. Also, on that front page where we showed you that bit that kind of talks about the case for sustainability in supply chain, I basically wrote that section working with our procurement leaders group, so our really big companies who work with SBN on their supply chain, to help them write business cases for their leadership, for their management around taking action on sustainability. So if you need something to kind of prop up your argument, you know, all of the really cool data that's out there around it being more effective, you know, the more sustainable you are, and I mean socially and environmentally, the more likely you are to retract the more likely you are to be able to attract and retain, is what I'm trying to say, top talent, the more likely you are to have happy and productive and healthy workers, the more likely you are to be able to sell things in today's consumer markets with expectations, the more likely you are to be able to get into international supply chain. A lot of that info is in there and quite helpful to pull from as well. Yeah, fantastic. And if you have more questions and you're a big company, maybe reach out about getting involved in some of our procurement leaders space as well. Fantastic. Yes, I can see someone has upvoted the need for reporting output. We hear you loud and clear. That's great. That feels like there should be the next iteration of the tool. Fantastic. The next biggest question we have coming up is, let's just see what the next one is. I think we've answered this one around, is there a way to tell which questions relate to legal compliance and which are best practice? Basically, that top bit of each section, that applies to legal compliance, and everything else in it should be best practice. Once you start answering the questions, we're really talking about best practice. So, you know, if you, for example, went into the health and safety section, Jenny can talk to this better than me, but, you know, you'll see right there, it says, look, there's the Health and Safety at Work Act. You need to be meeting those standards. That is a bare minimum. You need to be keeping your workers healthy and safe. But if you keep reading through the questions, there's examples of how to do that really well. And that was the same in all sections. But Jenny, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered sort of 3 areas: worker, you know, involvement, risk management, and overlapping duties or shared responsibilities. They're all legal requirements under the Act. But as Holly says, we've given you some information there to help maybe guide you through that, and other tips and case studies as well.
Awesome. Jonathan, do you have anything to add on that?
Oh, there are several questions in there that that have legal kind of compliance requirements in there, and yeah, it then points onto the information, depending on how you answer the question, that will help you figure out the answer and how to respond to that if you're not meeting those legal requirements.
Yeah, fantastic. And just to note, as I say, you might, when in reading the bit up top, it hopefully will make clear to you whether that applies to you or not. Not every business is going to need to comply with every bit of legislation, but the chances are, if you strive for best practice every time, really the legal requirements should be a minimum. That's sort of the floor, keeping you safe and keeping you out of jail, all the rest of it. But if you're striving for best practice, that's the safest and best and most awesome place to be for people and planet. Great. We have a question here. Is the plan to update info as time goes on? Yes, it absolutely is. We're hoping to keep this up to date. And the more that you use it and the more that you're excited about it and the more that you tell us that it is helpful, or you're asking us for new bits of information or things that you see coming up, the more energy we have around this to help engage everyone who's been a part of it and make it happen. You know, these things, if I'm just being really frank, they don't cost no money. We're offering it to you for no money, but they do cost quite a bit of money. They do take quite a bit of time. So the best way to ensure that this stays relevant is to see a lot of use around it. And that really helps us build the case as SBN as a charity, but also for government departments, people like that who are giving up their time to make this a reality. If we see you using it, it has to keep it really relevant and really cool and updated with your different needs and possibly future features. So yes, hopefully that is the plan. What other questions do we have? I can see 6 upvotes here on, I'll just read this question, the answer to that too. When you say the tool is aligned to best practice, does that include New Zealand's commitment to the Paris Agreement on limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees? And the question underneath is saying best practice in business is usually in alignment with science-based targets. Yes, so what I can see here is a bit of a conversation going on around basically what is in the carbon section around best practice. From memory, it is not sort of limited to saying one or the other, saying best practice has to be science-based targets, best practice has to be this, but it does say science-based targets are definitely a definition of best practice, and that here are the global commitments that are going on, and we recommend that you align yourselves to these. If you have some really specific questions on carbon, I recommend that you both have a look at this tool and have a read of that content, but also that you have a look at the climate action toolbox that it links you to. That is another really tangible hands-on tool that actually is carbon focused and lets you kind of figure out what you need to do for your business, gives you a calculator, creates an action plan. And then failing that, reach out to us at SBN. I am not the carbon expert. I'll be completely honest. You probably got that from my answer. I'm very much the wrangler of new tools and innovation things and supply chain, but we do have some really cool carbon expertise in the network, and we'll be happy to help direct you to the right place on that information. Great.
Oh, sorry.
Are
you finishing?
Sorry for that. We just had a dog walk into the room, which doesn't usually happen at work. It usually happens on home meetings, but I guess that is the joy of working in a co-working space, which is great for hanging out with lots of other businesses. We have time for a couple more questions, so I'm just going to scan down here and see what the top questions left are. This one seems really relevant and quite simple. Looking at the SBM website, don't see a place to find Docket. Is there a trick to this? On the homepage, there is a box as you scroll down that is linking you to Docket currently, but you can go there directly. The URL is sustainable.org.nz/Docket. So that's sustainable.org.nz/Docket. And Docket is spelled D-O-C-K-E-T. Similarly, if you go into the website, you can click on Take Action, and it's listed down under that. So hopefully that helps you find it. We'll also be sending out a link to Docket to everyone who's attended and signed up today. Great. Oh, yeah, sorry. Somebody said they've already found it. Love dogs. Great. Sorry, I should have invited the dog up to the screen. Probably much more exciting than me. About the quote, 70% of your business's sustainability impact comes from your supply chain. Do you have a source to share? Great question. So that quote comes from an amazing professor called Anne Stahl, who's been working closely with us from the Auckland University of Technology, AUT. And we had a big chat to him about how he came up with that figure. That's something he quotes in some of our workshops, and he's given us a huge extensive answer. So if you want to email us afterwards and get the full kind of email version of that, we can. But effectively, it ranges, from what we understand, between sort of like 60 to up to 90, depending on the business. And there's a whole lot of different sources that have attempted to come up with a figure around how much does your supply chain impact your sustainability. The main thing you need to know about that, though, is that basically, if you're a business who just tries to take sustainability action on looking after sorting out your rubbish and into recycling inside your actual office, thinking about your electricity, that's going to be really effective. The kind of actions that we think of, recycling paper, using less, really, really effective. But if you think about the impact of every single business that you deal with when you purchase something, I don't know, let's say you buy a car because you need to get around for your small business to visit people, all of the parts that go into that car across the supply chain, every bit of glass, every bit of rubber, every bit of metal, you're not personally expected to go down and ask everybody down that supply chain those questions. But if you can ask the person who sells you the car, hey, how do you make sure there's no modern slavery in your supply chain? How do you make sure that this is a carbon positive product? That will have ripple effects down your supply chain and will touch hundreds, if not thousands of businesses potentially, depending on the product or service. Which is why it's so effective to ask questions of people you're buying things from, as well as taking action personally. Fantastic, thank you. Do we have time for, what's our time check? 5 minutes or so? Awesome. I have my colleague in the room here who's frantically reading your questions, helping us pick the most popular. So we'll get through the most exciting ones. Just have one here about, will Docket be updated as per legislative changes? Yes, that's the plan with the updating. We intend to update Docket as much as we can as things come up, and particularly I imagine if there is really key legal changes, the plan is to stay on top of it so that you can trust that information. Then again, as I said, the more support, more people want to get involved. If you want to join this partnership and be a part of co-creating this tool, please reach out. The more support that we have, the better we can make this. We have a question saying, under the different board categories, which do you think New Zealand businesses are most lacking, most room for improvement? Oh, that feels like one for the panel, although contentious. Jenny and Jonathan, what do you think is most relevant? What should people be doing?
I'm not an expert in the other areas on the health and safety, so it's difficult for me to say. We still have a lot of room to grow in health and safety, would be my comment.
And Jenny, what would be the the main thing for businesses to do in health and safety? If they did one thing, what should they be doing?
Well, it's obviously managing the risks in their business, but getting the workers involved. We still see a lot of businesses that aren't talking with their workers, engaging with their workers, communicating with their workers. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jenny. Jonathan, what do you reckon?
Well, one of the main reasons why we got involved in development of this tool is that we feel that when we talk about sustainability, our mind usually immediately it goes towards the climate side of things, or reducing emissions, which are definitely worthy and key parts of sustainability. But we tend to forget about the worker side of things. So whether it's the health and safety, or then in terms of worker rights and modern slavery, it sort of takes a back seat. And currently we're seeing this topic coming through a little bit more in terms of people's consideration, and that's the main reason we got involved in looking at this tool in this area. So obviously we'll be prioritizing that.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'd agree with both what Jenny and Jonathan said in some ways. One of the reasons we wanted to make sure we really partnered with organisations like WorkSafe and MB to do this is too often sustainability is seen as one or the other. It's seen as social sustainability, or it's seen as environmental, like they're two separate things. And we all know the reality is you can't separate those things out. You have to be looking after your people and your communities and the flora and fauna that goes around your business, the nature that props up your raw materials and the environments that your business is interacting with and engaging with, as well as the environments that are getting degraded and polluted from the action that you have to take on a day-to-day as business, and hopefully things that you can do better to have less of that impact. So yeah, definitely agree with both of that. I'd say in the environmental space, and this is just my personal opinion, I think a new emerging trend we're seeing is regenerating nature really taking a forefront, where perhaps in the past we may have been more aware of some of the waste that we're creating, and that's still a huge goal. Let's reduce our waste to the point that hopefully we're making things circular. Hopefully things aren't wasted at all, that everything we use has a use again at the end of its life, or is prolonged in its life so long that the end of life is not really an immediate reality. And same with carbon. Carbon is still absolutely critical. Let's get measuring our carbon. Let's get reducing it. But businesses are often only just starting to get their head around their impact on nature. So my advice might be, if you haven't yet, get on the SBM website and have a look at our resources for businesses around their impacts on nature, and maybe have a think about what you could be doing to, understand and account for the flora and fauna on your doorstep. I think that is all we have time for. So what I'm going to do now is basically hand over to Jenny and Jonathan to have any closing words. Anything you would like to share before we have to close up?
I'll just say, get started with your considerations. This is a great tool to really get you thinking, and it's a really good start point to then explore even further. There's plenty of links in any of those areas, which will give you more and more information to get going. But yeah, just jump in and get started.
Just say thanks for attending the webinar and to SBM, and we hope it's useful to you, and I'm sure Holly and the team will be happy to get feedback if there's things that we can do better in our section. So yeah, thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you so much, Jenny and Jonathan. Yeah, and I would completely agree with that. This is just the beginning. I feel often when we have launches, people are all excited and celebrating the hard work that has happened, but really today is about you. It's about you as businesses using this tool to take action, you as government agencies using this in your supply chains, you as larger organizations using this in your supply chains. We really just need you to use it and give us feedback. We are happy to keep working on it, keep making it relevant, keep updating it, provided that you guys are using it and getting the help that you need from it. So yeah, chat to us. We're here. We want to make this really effective, and we want to make it this cool movement where if you go and have a look today and do your self-assessment, then my challenge for you is if you can then share that with one other business, ideally someone in your supply chain, but one other business. Let's create this sort of cool Docket tag effect across the country where we're all trying to meet the same kind of standards and all understanding what best practice for us truly looks like. Thank you so much all for joining us. If you didn't get your question answered, I am so sorry, but when we send around the follow-up email, you'll see details there to get in touch with us. We're happy to chat. and also take a look at those procurement resources that we mentioned around the Docket website. There are trainings, there are leaders groups, there are resources. There's plenty to get involved in if you want more of this. So kia ora. Thanks so much. Kia kite.
Thanks.